There we go.
There we go.
All right. We're functioning. Well, good morning, gentlemen. As you all know, my name is Greg with Primal Rights, and these two fine gentlemen are Tom Danielson. Go ahead and give a wave, Tom, so I know which one's
Okay.
you. And Andrew Rickson. So why don't we start by some introductions? Why don't you guys introduce yourselves? Tom, you can go first. Just say who you are and what you do at Alpha Munitions.
Yeah, it's we're a small company, so obviously one of the founders, and everything from uh, business to development. So everyone here kind of does a little bit of everything right now. And Andrew, he can introduce himself. He's our director of engineering.
Yeah, so I do a lot of the engineering, maintenance work on the machines, everything from helping clean up the shop to rebuilding equipment, designing tooling, getting tooling online, and manufacturing good parts. So again, a lot of everything. We both do both of us do all the testing on all the brass coming off, new product, all of that. So just keep busy.
Break a lot of stuff.
Yeah, we do good at that.
So it sounds like there's not much in the way of regimented job descriptions there at Alpha Munitions.
Yeah, we technically have job descriptions, but no, it's a team effort, and everybody does whatever has to be done to get across the finish line. So it's works well.
Fantastic. Well, obviously I wanted to get you on the stream here because I recently received a batch of 22 Creedmoor brass, and Tom calls me up and says, hey, I want to send you this new batch of 22 Creedmoor. I want you to check it out and see what you think, and just let me know how you like it. So I'm like, okay, cool. And I had tested the previous batch just a few months prior, and it was great. I mean, it was the best 22 Creedmoor brass that I've ever tested. And I thought to myself, well, I mean, what could they possibly have done? And those of you that follow Primal Rights here on Instagram or on YouTube, you saw the previous testing, and it was unbelievable. You get 40 some odd firings at crazy velocities, and I mean, just what I would consider to be really hot for a 22 Creedmoor, like an 80 grain bullet at 3,525, 3,550, and being able to get like 40 some plus firings, and that was crazy to me. So I thought to myself, yeah, sure, send it on. I'd like to see it, and so I start working with the stuff, and I can't kill it. I mean, you guys have probably seen that video already. I'm shooting this stuff at 22-243 Ackley velocities, and the brass is just going and going and going. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I called Tom and I literally said, what did you guys do? I was so blown away by how it was performing. So that's the topic of today's discussion. Is I wanted to give you guys an opportunity to hear directly from Alpha what it is that they have done, how they came to this place. And so Tom, Andrew, you guys, just whichever one of you wants to take this stuff, that's fine. But obviously, we're talking about the 22 Creedmoor from Alpha Munitions and your new OCD, your optimized case design. So take it away, gentlemen. Tell us how you got this idea and how it came to the point where it is right now, which is just frankly absurd.
Yeah, it's funny. When we started Alpha, we were shopping equipment, and we were at SHOT Show years ago, and people were telling you, you're nuts. Like, don't do this. You're crazy. The learning curve is 15 years, for 30 years, and well, whatever. So we started it, and the goal was to produce the strongest, most consistent brass in the world, made in the United States of America. So that's really important to us. And in looking at, I think we started in 14, 15-ish. We had the consistency down, and from there it was developing the strength of the case. And when we were doing metallurgical analysis and analyzing, every the composition of the brass and everything, there's really one company that stood above and beyond, and a phenomenal company, Lapua, and everybody knows them. They make an amazing product, and it was that much different than every other product that we looked at. So we said, wow, we got a lot of catching up to do, a lot of experimentation to do. So it's interesting. If you look at it, there's different grain structures, a different hardness, there's different, all kinds of things in very key areas. And we've been working on this for years. It's something that, you know, it could take you 10 years. You could stumble on something. It could take you 2 to 3 years. So that's kind of the backstory of all of it. In developing it, we weren't sure what performance level we were going to get. We just knew that we had to beat the benchmark company in the industry, or at least match it. So that was the ultimate goal. I think Andrew can kind of go into at 1,000-foot level of what we did to achieve that, from designing a custom cup to.
Well, first, just so our viewers understand, when did you guys start? When were you founded?
We started the company in 2015. I think we took possession of our equipment in 17.
I think it was because it was right after I graduated. May 9th of 2016 is when I think we moved.
2016 moved to Utah. Took possession of the equipment. Probably spent a year or more banging
our head against the wall,
and making tons of mistakes and saying, why did we do this? I'm never going to financially recover from this.
Yeah.
So we, and I think we first launched brass retail sometime in 2018. And we knew we had the consistency because we developed the system using single point tooling, which means every single part hits the exact same tools as it goes through the production line. So every case, even if you see a little bit of weight variation, the internal geometry, the internal dimensions are identical. So we knew the consistency was there, and then we set the goal of creating the strongest brass in the world, and that's a very long, arduous process. That was years. So
okay, so we'll and Andrew, we'll have you talk about that, but that is just phenomenal to me. From going from 2018 to making the strongest, it's not just this 22 Creedmoor brass is strong. Yes, it's amazingly strong. It'll take more firings than anything that I've ever seen to date, but it's accurate. It's not just, okay, this is strong brass so that you can, the speed freaks can be happy. It's not a sales gimmick for you guys. This is like you're pursuing the most elite, most upper tier of the brass manufacturing process, aren't you?
Yeah, it's the absolute goal. When you see all these new calibers, and all of a sudden you see the military and people saying, we want to push the envelope of what's possible now from a pressure perspective. You got 308 that's running at, I don't know, 50,000 PSI. And then you got the 6.5 Creedmoor that maxes out at 61-ish thousand, 62,000 PSI. They're looking at it and saying, can we run it at 66,000 PSI? And the thinking previously was no.
The new bimetal stuff's supposed to be able to run the SIG is 75, I think.
Yeah, there's new bimetal cases, there's plastic cases. It's all really cool technology. And our thought was, okay, that's a pretty big jump. That's expensive. Can we do it with brass? When we looked at the metallurgical piece of it, we didn't think that every ounce of performance was extracted out of a brass case yet. And so that's the ultimate goal is let's take it to the line of where it's I don't know how to say it. It's not functional, and let's back down until we get what we sent you.
Wow. Well, bravo, gentlemen. 2018 to now. I'm not super good at math but that's like an extremely short period of time to do something as complicated as this. And Andrew, why don't you take us into, let's start talking about the complicated stuff. How exactly is this happening?
Well, I think one thing to add on quick was that we always made incremental steps. When we've gone through our design, it's how we first went through and did a sensitivity analysis and said, hey, what are the key components that we can control on that piece of brass in our manufacturing process to make it better, make it shoot more consistent. And we determined there was neck tension was probably the most critical, consistent internal volume, which comes to the single point tooling that Tom was talking about, and then flash hole, centered and clean. So we've been systematically nailing each of those, going through it. And once we had those down, we saw, like Tom was saying, the consistency. The last part was strength. You know, everyone goes out to these matches and they'll go out to Oklahoma and shoot in this horrible conditions and dust and be like, oh, my bolt's sticking. But when I shot back in, you know, wherever, it wasn't. And so there's all these issues, right, that the weather can bring. And so we said, hey, how do we make this strong enough to withstand these additional pressures so it can work well across all weather conditions, all environments? And then what we stumbled upon was like, I think originally we hadn't intended to get it this strong. And what we found is like we could go past that limit a little further and we were able to make it even better. But from a really high level, we custom design everything from the raw materials we get in all the way through to the finished product of all the tooling. When we go through, it's technically called an ironing process. A lot of people in this industry call it a draw process. But we had to do a lot of math and a little bit of magic to make it work. And we look at how we shape and form this brass correctly. And that gives us the correct grain structure in the brass in key locations that strengthen it. Because the one thing with brass is you want it hard and strong in certain areas, and you want it soft and ductile in others. And so you have to get that gradient through the brass from the base up to the mouth, of course, correct. Because one of the things that we have found is that we were actually a little too hard in certain areas, and we weren't getting correct chamber. We were getting good seal because the neck and the shoulder were sealing, but we weren't grabbing that chamber, right? And so when you don't have that surface area contacting that chamber, you're going to get more bolt thrust because you don't have that area of friction. If you don't have that contact, then your frictional forces are decreasing. And so all that pressure formed during firing gets thrown against the bolt. And we actually had originally seen with some of our harder brass that we weren't getting good chamber form. And then we were seeing what we thought were pressure signs, but that was just because we were having a lot greater bolt thrust. And so we actually have reworked a new metal annealing temperature process to soften up certain areas and keep the other areas very, very strong. But without going into the nitty gritty detail of it, it all comes down to tooling geometries.
Yeah, you mean you're not going to share like the stuff that way, because you know you're obligated to tell every single one of your competitors how to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Honestly, it's really everything. It comes down to if you don't have the right cup, it doesn't work.
And a good example of that is we have our Dasher cup and our GT cup. If people are familiar with those cases, you would think they're made on the same cup. We don't. That we have to order two different cups to form those two pieces. And we tried our hardest to make it work on both, and we couldn't. We didn't get the optimal results. We could have made it work, but we didn't get the optimal results we wanted. So we said, instead of having one cup and having one product that's good and one that's like not as good, we said, F that. We want two different cups and make the best of both.
Wow. Okay. Well, and obviously the GT family of cases is very much becoming like the Creedmoor family of cases, where is that people are choosing which family they want to be a part of, and then you guys are building out the vertical on both sides. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, just
I'm a Creedmoor fan.
It's
Not a GT fan, but
no, it's okay. But quickly, it's this is key during the process. It's there's just days where you don't know how you're going to make it happen. And anytime you're starting a small business, and we called around looking for help, and we were able to connect with people in the industry that weren't necessarily wanted to share stuff, but they said, oh, it really took our company 15 years to figure this out. And that's when you're just pulling your hair out of your head. The one thing that's really important, and it's a huge part of our company, is the community of shooters and like yourself. And without, working with 20 or 30 shooters constantly giving us feedback, telling us what's good or bad, that's really accelerated this process and allowed us to get this OCD technology out. So it's very much, the heavy lift had the community involved, and we truly appreciate and value that. And we'll always, lean on the community for help. So it's an important part of the company for us.
Well, to me, that's just absolutely awesome, because I can't tell you how many times I've talked with my customers or other people in the industry, and a company will release a product, and then it'll get a revision, and then another revision, and then another revision, and it's just endless. And no more than somebody saves up the money to buy the thing, all of a sudden the thing changes, and now the thing that they just bought is worth next to nothing, because nobody will want the older one. Everybody wants the new one. And I've always wondered, how is it that these companies don't go and find people to test this stuff? Like, most of the products that get the revisions, well, geez, I could have told you in 10 seconds that it's going to need to be changed for this. And so it's that part about it is incredible to me. Like, you guys had the foresight to say, okay, we can produce a product, but we don't have the capability to use it in all the different ways that all of the different shooters are going to use it in, and go find them and have them report back to you. And because, I mean, this is way back. I mean, this is when you guys were first getting started. I tested some 22 Creedmoor you guys did, and do you remember what I told you?
Geez, that was horrible.
Yeah, I was like, this stuff isn't even, I couldn't get the velocity. It was good brass. It was accurate. Like you said, you had the consistency. It was accurate, and it shot well, but I just couldn't get it to perform how I expected it to perform in terms of exterior ballistics.
Yep.
I needed it to be a little faster. And to this day, you guys gained my respect in a monumental way, because most companies, they don't have the capability to take negative feedback, and like, they just really don't want to hear it. And if they do happen to hear it, you'll probably never hear from them again. And well, those that follow know that I'm pretty exacting, and I'm pretty open with my opinions about stuff.
Yep.
And so I was really amazed. And so, for those of you watching, this is not something that he's just saying they do. This is something that Alpha absolutely does, because the very first batch of 22 Creedmoor that I tested was not representative of their current product. Frankly, it wasn't representative of their previous product. The previous stuff was amazing. This new stuff is just out of this world, and it's just incredible. So that foresight that you have to seek out the different use cases, because that's your critical problem, right? You can't create as many use cases as all of your customers can come up with, right?
Yeah, this is, so it's interesting. We want our product line to be driven by what the community needs, and that's not always the easiest path. So let's say Dasher, for example. The community really wanted native Dasher brass, and so we said, we're going to do it. And when you look at, oh man, when you start calling the reamer companies, how many Dasher reamers do you have? I have hundreds. And everyone in our community knows this. There are so many variables, from the barrel to the action to the rifle to the weather conditions to the primer. So it's very easy to say, oh, the brass has an issue in this type of action. Well, that's their problem. When we get feedback, we'll see if it's trending towards something. And the Dasher is a perfect example. We said, we've got to make this Dasher work in 98% of these chambers. And so the first run of Dasher came out. It was pre-OCD. We were still working on that technology, but we tweaked it and sent it out to the community, and as many of the guns that people had issues in, it wasn't a lot, and sent the OCD brass, and they said, oh my God, it runs great. And so our goal is always, I mean, we're obsessive. If someone calls me up and said, I only got 10 firings on my GT, no joke. We grab their lot of brass, we'll take 10 pieces, and we'll spend 5 hours torture testing it. Because we want to find out, is there something, where is the issue?
Right.
Is it the brass
wrong? Or is the customer using it wrong? Because that's a real possibility too. You got some guy setting back his shoulders 7,000ths,
yeah.
And I mean, having case head separation. You guys can't design around that, right?
Right.
Well, we try to in a way, right? If we're able to, like with the OCD brass, if we can strengthen in areas and create ductility in other areas, it can overcome certain things. And that was part of, where we were going with the OCD. We wanted to overcome all these different reamer designs where the bases change from 470 to 472, and then if the gunsmith cuts it a little out of center, it's going to be a 474. And so that's what we were trying to overcome, is so that our customers don't see those issues. It kind of hides certain issues with the rifle, because what we found with our original Dasher brass is that if the chamber was cut right, if it was cut with the right reamer, done well, barrels right, it worked. We had great success with it. We were able to run it up to pressure. But what we found was with we call it tolerance stacking. Once you start looking at the brass tolerances, then the reamer tolerances, then the actual gunsmithing tolerances and the barrel, like when you started, if you got all in the bad side of those tolerances, it stacked up to be, our brass ain't going to work so well. And that's what kind of led us into it. And that's how we try to create the OCD to overcome all those issues.
Well, and in that journey, when you overcome what I would call deficiency or disparity in the industry, with strengthening your brass and tailoring it to that degree, that essentially means that the worst case scenario, someone's still going to have a fantastic experience with your brass, but amongst those people that are truly experienced and knowledgeable about their rifle, that has a chamber in it that's well thought out, cut by a very talented smith, they're going to get an unbelievable experience. So that's kind of the delta of how it works, right? You have a great experience, basically the best in the industry, and then from there it just gets better the more manicured your setup is. Is that right?
Yeah, it's exactly right. It's going to work. For example, we worked with Alex Wheeler on the BRA. It's going to work in an Alex Wheeler gun, but it's got to work in not say they're bad guns, but factory guns. It's got to work in everything. And so our ultimate goal was to design something that will obviously give the shooter the best possible experience with their setup. We play a small role because there's so much that goes into getting a rifle to shoot. This, but if we can take that small role that we play and make it as easy as possible for the shooter, then that's the ultimate goal.
Oh, now you're probably venturing into that humble to a fault territory here. I just want to, for those watching, brass is one of the most important aspects of getting these rifles to shoot. I don't want anybody to think otherwise, because if you're not asking very much, meaning like let's say you're looking for a half MOA performance, then what Tom is saying is probably pretty true. It kind of, you can kind of probably run whatever brass, but if you start asking more, either more precision and accuracy, or more firings, or more uniformity, or this, that, uniformity translating directly to the accuracy and precision capabilities, brass all of a sudden goes from being, well, I'll just buy whatever I can find, to it's now one of the most important pieces of this whole puzzle. Because so much is just, if you have a little bit more lube on one side of the case than the other when you do your sizing op, and if you have brass that's not able to respond correctly and be forgiving of your imperfections at the reloading bench, it's going to be that much harder for you to have a uniform result in your loaded ammo. So I just want to put that out there. Like, yeah, okay, you guys offer a small role, and kudos and everything for being humble. But folks, this is a huge deal, and I can't possibly overstate how important the OCD brass and its new capabilities that it's bringing to us shooters is going to be. I mean, this is like a groundbreaking thing. Now, if you guys can continue getting better from here, well, great and bravo. But otherwise, if this is the new normal, this is going to be where the industry is going to be for the next 20, 30, 40, 50. I mean, I don't even know where this road goes for you guys, but I know where it goes for me as a shooter. And if I have access to brass like this all the time, my job just became infinitely easier.
We really appreciate that. It means a lot coming from you because you're a stickler. And so we know you're going to tell us straight. If it sucks, it sucks. And if it's great, it's great. So, we truly appreciate that. With that, I think one thing we always want to be very clear, and I think you saw this, it's very interesting. And maybe you can speak to it a little bit, but the brass doesn't show pressure signs like you typically see with conventional brass. So we want to make sure that people are being very careful where if you're loading your ladder test up to where you're normally waiting to feel a little boat lift, that might not come. So
you guys took away our brake pedal.
Yeah.
That's what happened. Normally you see it on the brass, and now you don't. Okay, so you guys have some pretty impressive testing facilities, and I know that various entities that you work with have some great testing facilities. Now, when I say the statement, just because you can't see the pressure doesn't mean it's not there. What do you guys say about that? Like, what warning, what very finite warning could you provide shooters that are going to be adopting the OCD cases in terms of the velocity? What's the new brake pedal? How are they supposed to operate in this?
Yeah, it's ultimately looking at velocities. So obviously there's tons of data. All the bullet manufacturers, powder companies have that data out there. It's very important to follow that data and judge your velocities. Just because your 6.5 Creedmoor will run at 6.5 PRC speeds doesn't mean that case is just creating that much more pressure. So just because your rifle will or the brass will take 72,000 PSI doesn't mean you should do it. It's putting a lot more stress on your setup, your rifle, your lugs, everything. So
if you do get in bad weather conditions and then you water down the barrel, like if you're prime example, I was out hunting and I had a 7 saw from West Texas Ordnance. I knew my charge was pretty high. I put a can on the end of it. I pulled the trigger. I was like, that's sticky bolt. And I was like, that's got to be crazy high pressure for this case to have a little bit of sticky bolt. I backed it down a grain of powder. I think it just comes down to common sense too. Know what, you had experience loading these calibers with other brass or with our brass, and know that you don't want to run in a 6 mil 3,300 feet per second. That's a very high pressure load. And so back that down, and I think it's safe. Now, the good thing is we have tested our cases to failure. We were just like, hey, we need to do it ourselves before we let someone in the community do it. And the good thing is the failure types we've seen, the case heads and part of the sidewalls are so strong that we actually see a vertical crack through the case, and a vertical meaning through the case length. And what that crack is just, we think it's what's happening is as that case is expanding out in the chamber, you're getting tensile forces, and it actually rips and tears. And so from those hoop stresses, we see a little tear form, and that gas leaks out. So we haven't actually seen case head separation on any of our OCD brass. And we've extracted, so we've shot everything from the 260 gas gun with the OCD, and we were having this little split occur at the very, very high pressures, and the gun still functioned great, in all honesty.
And when we say high pressures, we mean stupid pressures.
Right, like 120, 130,000 PSI, right? Like 2-3 times normal.
It's to the point where normally you'd be beating your bolt open with a dead blow. So but we have to do this level of testing just in case. So it's
Right.
just us doing our due diligence, not something someone should ever do. But yeah, it's proved to be extraordinarily safe if there's something, if there's a rupture, something catastrophic happens.
Well, so the brass, its primary function is to maintain, it's to hold the pressure, right? Now, in the
And
case
seal
of
the chamber.
brass failure, the rifle can be damaged significantly because in a case head separation or a longitudinal crack up the side of the case, like a vertical crack up the side of the case, like you're saying, that stuff will score the chamber. You know, the chamber is not designed to get that abrasive blast to it. And if you expose it to something like that, even one time, then the chamber will get scored. It's going to create all kinds of potential malfunctions in the future, because even if you get the carbon and junk cleaned out of there, it will have just like scored and eroded a little particular geography into your chamber, and that's never going to be a good thing. But then too, when the case ruptures like that, you've got that gas pressure escaping now, and it's going to escape most of the time before the bullet is out of the barrel. And so it's going to have a lot of pressure, very high velocity, and there's going to be debris with it. Now, some action designs, they cannot take that without the shooter getting injured. I mean, like, the shooter's going to get injured. If they're not wearing eye pro, they can lose their eyes. That gas pressure is going to come out and around that bolt. It's going to go through the firing pin hole, out the rear of the bolt, around the cocking piece. Like, there's a tremendous number of ways that this can go bad for a shooter. So you new guys out there that haven't loaded very much, what Andrew was saying about, you know, you've loaded these other cases. Well, a lot of you haven't loaded these cases, and you're going to go out and buy Alpha Munitions OCD as your first brass. And when you do that, you have to understand that, yes, the brass is amazing. Yes, the brass can take the pressure. It doesn't mean your action can. Meaning that even if the brass does its job and holds that pressure, without the chamber and the action front band around that brass, that case would fly apart into a million pieces. There's no way that the brass itself can hold that.
Yep.
So the brass, despite being very good, it has to have the whole vessel there to contain the whole thing and send that bullet out the barrel. Now, some of you might remember back in, this is not too far back, you know, we could, like, maybe the 80s, 90s, and guys were taking these old era Mausers and blowing them up with factory ammunition, because all of a sudden this new brass and new powder was so much better, and in a new rifle it could take it, and they were loading this factory ammo up hot. Well, guys were, you guys might remember this, but guys were blowing up these old Mausers left and right, and it was as a result of the metallurgy and everything that was in those actions not being strong enough and not being able to take the pressures, even though the components that were being used in the ammunition could. This situation is a lot like that. Just because you could take this 22 Creedmoor brass and load it to 22 243 Ackley velocities doesn't mean that action can take that kind of pressure.
Right.
If the brass fails, folks, there's going to be gas venting and, you know, stuff flying around. It's no fun. Damage your rifle. But if your action fails, you essentially just set off a hand grenade right in front of your face. And that's the part that I really want to drive home here. It's like the Alpha brass is going to be, it's super capable and it's super strong. When it finally does fail, because it will at some point, you keep stacking the wrong combination of components together, and I mean, you can create a situation where you can make this brass fail. I mean, accidentally throw some N320 in there, you know,
It'll do it.
you can make it fail. And so, yes, the brass is going to be amazingly good, it's strong, but the way that you should look at that is the value proposition. Because I've had a lot of guys complain to me about, well, yeah, but Alpha brass is expensive. I'm like, man, what are you comparing it against? To the cheapest com block brass in the universe? And like, it's really not that expensive. But then this new OCD brass now When you add that into the equation, well, you guys all of a sudden just became the cheapest brass on the market for a shooter. And so the strength of the brass doesn't mean that you get to turn your 22-250 into a 22-243 athlete, or something like that. Like it doesn't mean that all of a sudden the rifle that you've got and the cartridge that you're shooting is no longer the same cartridge. What it means is that you've got this forgiveness and a safety buffer. With normal brass, you run these normal pressures and normal velocities, and you only get so many firings out of it. Well, the consistency that you get in performance, not just velocity, but accuracy and precision from one firing to the next, that's a problem that I see in my brass constantly. And I'm talking everybody's brass to date, with the exception of this 22 Creedmoor, from firing to firing. If you're running right on the edge of what the cartridge is capable of, meaning in a 22 Creedmoor, everybody knows a 3,500 foot per second load that's on the warm side. Well, with some other brass that I use, by the time I get 4 or 5 firings into it, all of a sudden I've got to really chase down my node again, because like the brass is just not behaving the same way anymore. And so here I am having to do load development on a cartridge that I can only get 1,200 rounds down each barrel before it's toast. And I'm sitting here and having to spend 50, 60 rounds in load development every 4th or 5th firing because the brass is changing so much. You don't have to touch this stuff. You can get all of the accuracy and precision that I'm seeing from firing number 2. Because firing number 1, let's face it, folks, every brass, you're going to have to form it. It's going to change a lot from firing number 1 to number 2. But firing number 2 to firing number 50, I didn't touch my load. That's the critical thing. You're not changing the cartridge into something else. What you are getting is stability from firing to firing. And you're not going to have to go chasing this stuff around. It's going to respond for you. Do you guys have any comment about that? Have other shooters been seeing that?
Yeah, it's every time you fire the brass, it's brass. Everything's moving. The more we can limit that movement, the more consistent that piece of brass is going to shoot every single firing. So it's you see it where you're at a number of firings, you're having to adjust your shoulder bump. And that's not ideal, right? Because that means the brass has moved quite a bit if you're having to bump another thou or 2 thou after 6, 7 firings. So it all comes down to the strength of the product and keeping that brass where it is and not flowing around. So,
and that's part of when we originally designed our hardness gradient through the brass. That's how we determined what hardness we want where, is because we say, hey, at the mouth we need to be at X number on the Vickers scale, because we know we need good ductility there, we need good flow, good movement. But as we came down the case, that's when it starts to change, that's where we want the strength of the case to be, to create that consistent pressure vessel, to say that, hey, this volume's not going to change here. This is where we're going to see some change. Down here is where it's strong, and that's the core of the case. And then, and also though, what matters is, consistency of the parts, or the tools used in reloading. Every time you load a bullet, size a piece of brass, shoot the brass, you're cold working the brass. You're changing the grain structure. You're work hardening that brass. And so how do you anneal your brass? Do you need to anneal or not? And so that's where a lot of human contact or the loader's techniques come into play too. If you're using poor loading components, poor reloading dies, that's where it's not as good. If you size your chamber incorrectly or you use the wrong reamer, you're going to do additional cold working. Whereas if you're only having 3 thou of growth and then you're sizing it back down by 7 thou in your neck die, it's doing way more cold work than you need to. And so it's looking at how to optimize your reloading setup so that you're only working at just the right amount. And then you can go through, hit your anneal process on it, and go back to it and shoot.
So now that we've had an opportunity to understand how you guys kind of got here, what's the plan moving forward? Like, is this tech going to be flowing into the rest of your products? How many of your products right now that you offer are to this level? What does the next year look like for Alpha Munitions?
Yeah, so we validated the technology now in every caliber that we make, and unfortunately, it's kind of limited the launch of new calibers, but it was quite a heavy lift. You end up replacing all of our tooling, and the tooling for brass manufacturing is extraordinarily expensive, especially the stuff that we use. So getting everything, the entire plant retooled to manufacture this stuff, it slowed the process, but we validated now in every single caliber, and everything coming out now, I think for the last 6 months is OCD. We're working on the other thing that we've been working on since we started the company, actually, is flash hole size. And it's funny, our CSO Jim Cobber told us that he thinks the 80 thou flash hole is superior to the 60 in small rifle primer brass. So we validated that in our internal testing. We're working with Alex Wheeler, Tom Mosel, and that group on the flash hole study. And so far, with a season of testing, there's a great thread on Accurate Shooter about it. They've shown the 80 thou is superior in accuracy to the 60, which is what we felt.
And just for a second, just for people that might not know, because these worlds don't overlap very much until you start looking at the really finite. If you're asking a lot of your rifle, you'll run into guys. But Alex and Tom, I mean, we're talking about guys that at 1,000 yards, they're not happy until they're seeing groups like this, right? I mean,
yeah. I mean, you're talking about one of the best group shooters on planet Earth, and one of the best rifle builders on planet Earth. And yeah, Alex's rifle this year with our BRA brass with the 80 thou flash hole, Glenn Kulzer broke the IBS world record. I think it was a 10-shot 1,000-yard group at 2.64, somewhere around there. He ended up smashing, I think, 8 records.
That's like the bottom of a soda can at 1,000 yards.
Yeah, it's so yeah. And they test. I mean, the bench rest group. They're testing primers. They're testing everything, and this with your priming tool. That priming depth makes a difference. Everything. So the thought process forever has been the 60 thou flash hole produces better ESs and SDs. We searched for the data, and we couldn't find anything. We called the major companies and said, "Why do you use this?" And they said, "Well, we don't know." So we tried to collaborate with a couple of them and say, "Why don't you guys do some testing? We'll do some testing, and let's put the data together, and let's produce what's best for the community, because we can make a 60 thou flash hole, we can make a 80 thou, we can make a 40, we can make whatever we want. Let's produce what's best."
40's pretty hard to make.
40's pretty hard, but whatever. We'll figure it out. But so Alex and Tom are meticulous, and the next year is going to be another season of shooting, and they don't want to release the data, and I respect that until they get a couple seasons under their belt. The initial data has been really positive towards the 80, so hopefully within the next year, that's one of the big things that we want to work on and write up and actually provide data to the community on that.
So you're planning on kind of collecting all of this stuff, and like I noticed on your guys' website, you've kind of got a blog type thing going on. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Oh, you mean the news and data piece of it?
Yeah, because the data that you're talking about collecting and sharing with the community, are you going to do it there, or you have some other platforms in mind?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. Our CSO Jim is a writer. He has a lot of published articles in Precision Rifle Shooter magazine, very technical articles. So I think getting some of the writers to write about it, because it is one of these factors you read about it a lot on the forums, that this is the best, and for us it's always coming out of the medical field and pharmaceuticals and oil industry, it's like we got to see the data, and the data's got to be tested, and it's got to be real. And so not being able to find, so you know, it's probably gonna be a combination of, yeah, sharing it on the website. I think we'll have some articles written. I think it's important, obviously, to interact with the community on these forums, because, you know, it's the best way for us to share with a broad number of people and get feedback and stuff like that. So I think it's going to be a combination of everything and anything.
I think a great example of where this comes from is originally everyone looks back to like, hey, I weight sort my brass. And we did a lot of initial testing with our brass and said, we knew it all comes down to internal capacity. Internal volume is everything for pressure form. When you look at Pivnert, that's how the equation bases, you know, gas pressure. So the volume is incredibly important. Everyone was weighing out their cases to try and infer that, you know, this one's 1 grain heavier, that means the weight's different. This one's 2 grains heavier, that means the weight, and then they would batch it. When, in all honesty, when you look at the manufacturing process of brass, that doesn't matter. Because the problem is where's that weight difference? Is it in the case head? Because the extractor groove has a different piece of tooling. And you look at multi-point tooling, they have, you know, 3 different punches, 6 different punches running. That sets your internal capacity. And if you're running a different extractor groove, that case is a little bit longer. If your OD or the ID of your forming die is large, it's going to have more case wall thickness, but the volume's still the same. And that was the issue. Is like there's all these different factors that change the weight of the case. And with our brass, when we came out and we did a single point tooling, we realized, hey, throw that data out the window. It doesn't matter. We still go ahead and we make sure that the weight the internal capacity is verified and it's very accurate. But the group think in the community was, hey, this is everything. And we've got to try and, I don't know if it's re-educate, but we want to release this data out there and say, hey, this doesn't matter with our brass. Certain other brasses it will, but with our brass, it doesn't matter. You don't need a weight sort. Hey, when you look at your flash holes and you're deburring all those flash holes to uniform them, we did that in our process to make sure our manufacturing technique was correct so that we were producing a clean, deburred, centered flash hole every single time. You don't need to do that. And there's certain voices on the internet and on Facebook where they'll be like, no, you need to do this. It's like, you have no idea what you're talking about. Like, just be quiet and go away. And that's what we want to do. Is we want to release the data behind it instead of just having, oh yeah, I heard from so-and-so that this is the best way to do it. Or I heard 60 thou flash holes are the best. We found that there's 2 very distinct values in the flash hole diameter that are coming out as best, and neither of them are 60 thou. And 60 thou is doing second to worst, actually. And so we want to present that data and give people the opportunity to look at, hey, here's the raw data. This is actually, you know, make your own interpretation of it. We're not just going from results in the field saying, oh yeah, this is what it is.
And again, it's not us doing the data collection and sending it out to everybody. We want to you know, we want to go to the thought leaders in the industry, people that are absolute at the pinnacle, the experts, and give them the leeway and stay out of it. Yeah. And we say, here, you come back to us and you tell us what's the best. If the best is X, we make X. If it's Y, we make Y. And so, you know, that's also the key, and that's where the community comes in, and you know, thought leaders in the community helping us out.
So for the past 6 months, if somebody ordered some brass from you guys, it was OCD.
Yep.
And so going forward then, it's all going to be OCD. And as we progress into it, you're going to be fine-tuning these cup designs for the various different cartridges that you offer cases for presently, right?
Right.
So the big question on everybody's mind, because I know this is very much on my mind, the rest of the chamberings, you know, like there's only about 1 million different cartridges out there. What can you guys share with us at all? What you're like, what's coming? You know, like, do you have your sights on any specific cartridges, or a general plan that you can share with people about, like, you know, well, we're going to try to release this many cartridges per, you know, like whatever. Once upon a time, I talked to you guys and I'm like, hey man, you need to make dasher brass. And you're like, no, not really. And
Well, I remember those conversations, and just to let you know, we were testing and trying to make it. So we just don't release it. We'll be like, oh yeah, totally, we'll do that.
yeah.
We are working on it.
Yeah, we have let's see, 3 calibers that'll be released. We're obviously very focused on the precision competition market right now. When
you say
one thing we heard constantly from people, and it's valid. It's you don't, and we get these emails. It's you're not as good as company X because you have no world records. And yes, you're right. We don't, and completely valid. And so we're very interested in the competition market because we want those world records. We want the world records.
When you say precision competition, are we talking F-class bench rests or what?
Bench rest, PRS, F-class, all of it.
Okay.
So we're very focused on all those disciplines. Obviously, a lot of the calibers we make are varmint hunting and hunting related. We're not into the magnums yet, but I would say the next 5 calibers are going to be competition leaning calibers. There'll be some crossover into hunting and things like that. For the next, part of the issue is this supply chain issue, and we have a new custom cupping that we developed, and it used to take 45 days to get, and now it's 6 months. So that's slowing some things down. But yeah, our goal is in the next 12 to 18 months, it's going to be like 6 to 7 new calibers.
Wow, that's aggressive.
Yeah, we have 3 that'll be launched here. We're hoping by the end of the year. So I think the community will be really excited about what's coming, and some fun marketing stuff that's going to be included with it.
Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, you'll see it in the dasher brass soon. We're creating some characters that, people have seen it with the GT, and we're creating some characters that go along with the brass that are fun and interesting and weird. So
Okay. Keep it light. Yep.
yeah, weird and odd, but no, it's PG rated characters that'll be coming to all the calibers, and just trying to have a little bit of fun with it as well, because that's the other wonderful thing about the community is we can all take a joke.
Right. Well,
So,
that is fantastically exciting. I know that as a shooter, it's nice to see how you guys are interacting with the community all the time. You're not absent. Since your guys' inception, you haven't been absent, despite any of the attacks or the pushback, or you guys are present all the time. And I know that that's been really fun to see. And so it'll be interesting to see what these characters look like. Like everybody's familiar with the 6GT character, but
yeah, I don't know if you can see it, but that's going to be launched soon. That's a James Bond beaver, and he's representing our dasher. So he's going to be released fairly soon.
Awesome.
So yeah, we were fortunate to have some really awesome artists that we'll be tagging them when we release these guys, and they're just absolutely unbelievable. So we got lucky in finding them.
Wow. Very cool. Well, we already went way over the time that we kind of allotted for this thing. So do you guys have anything together or individually or alpha that you guys want to share with people before we decide to be done here?
Yeah, I want to say that your new primer pocket measuring device is absolutely awesome. We've been looking for something like that, and we use statistic process control in our QC department. We're very, very exacting, and we're constantly taking measurements, and we've been looking for that specific tool now for years. So I don't know if you've launched it yet or people know about it, but but that is going into our QC process, and can't thank you enough.
This is the analog version. Those guys, obviously, they're running the high tech. They've got the 1/10,000th resolution digital version in their QC line now, so that's pretty awesome to hear. But this is called the Primeware, folks, WHERE, and we are in the process of launching it. We have it completed. We're just waiting on the packaging material, and we'll get it up on the website for everybody to order. This is the analog version here, and we went to the best dial manufacturer, the best drop indicator manufacturer in the United States, and had those made for us. So, and then we outfitted the rest of the kit with custom collars, and this is the last tool that you'll need to measure primer pockets, measure your primer depth. You can measure your primer height with it, and so that's the tool that they're talking about. And I'm super excited to get it in their hands so they can tell me what was wrong with it, if anything. It sounds like you guys are pretty happy with it. So
yeah, it's phenomenal. And you know, with that, one of the things we think about all the time, and I think it's important with what's going on with our country right now, is when you stand back and you look at your firearm and you look at your loading bench and you look at your suppressor and your primer pocket depth tool and everything, it's really amazing that you can look at that and say very easily 100% of what's on my rifle and on my loading bench is made in America by Americans. And I think that's something that's really special about our community and really cool, because walk around your house and try to do that. So I think that's something that's just absolutely unique to the shooting community, and obviously I don't see that changing anytime soon.
well, it sure is nice to have you guys pursue what you're pursuing, because having as you said, America, shooting is our sport.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing more unique American than shooting, and it doesn't matter where you go in the world, they would tend to agree with that. And so it's phenomenal that you guys are committing yourselves and have taken such a risk. I mean, what an amazing, like you said, how many people told you, oh, you're crazy, start a brass manufacturing company? What are you, nuts? So I'm glad that you guys had the diligence to see this through, and I'm super excited for the future. Hint, hint, 6.5 PRC, cough, cough, 6.5 PRC, cough. Did I mention to you guys about how you should probably start looking at 6.5 PRC, bro?
I think every other day someone contacts about it.
I've got hundreds of emails and Facebook messages and Instagram messages. So yeah, we know.
Yeah,
it's an awesome caliber.
I'm pretty sure I heard Tom say just now, like, you're supposed to like send them messages on all of their social media stuff about all the coverages that you guys want.
What you really want is the 7mm PRC. That's Mike.
Well, thanks for coming on, guys. I really appreciate it. And it was a blast. It was great talking with you. I look forward to collaborating with you guys more in the future. And let's do this again sometime here in the near future.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, thank you again for testing and all your data and feedback. We truly appreciate it, and it just helps us tremendously. So thank you.
You bet. Happy to do it. All right. You guys have a great weekend.
All right. You too. Take care. Bye.
Bye, everyone.